Solomon, who spoke exclusively to the Prime Minister today. Evan, what more could he have planned to stop the pandemic?
Yeah, the Prime Minister told me that everything is still on the table. There are concerns from a health point of view about border closing, even closing borders to countries like the United States. And on the economic side, a lot more fiscal stimulus. Here's exactly what he said.
We are considering everything. There is nothing we have taken off the table. We're in close discussion with public health experts to look at what is the best way to keep Canadians safe.
So the Prime Minister saying everything's on the table. He had a cabinet meeting, which is rare on a Sunday, to talk about those things. So Canadians should expect more announcement about borders, more announcements about funding for health officials, and more announcements about economic stimulus as this pandemic continues, John.
And of course, the Prime Minister is still at home in self-isolation. You asked him about his health as well.
Yeah, I did, because a lot of Canadians are concerned. His wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, has tested positive for coronavirus, COVID-19. Apparently, she's feeling good. He says she has headaches, and it's more like a flu, but he says his children are fine, and he feels fine. But I did ask him why he's not getting tested. A lot of Canadians want to know that. Donald Trump said he has been tested, and Justin Trudeau said he's already in self-isolation. He's exhibiting no symptoms, and he said it would not be useful, according to medical advice, for him to get the test because it wouldn't make any difference to his situation, and that's why, following his medical doctors, he is not getting tested for now.
All right, thank you, Evan. And the Prime Minister will address Canadians tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can watch that live on CTV and CTV News channel with our chief news anchor, Lisa Laflamme. Meantime, Calgary has declared a state of local emergency, but across Alberta, everyone is talking about the closure of all the schools. It comes amid a spike in cases across the country. Here's CTV's Janet Dirks.
Since the virus was first confirmed in Canada at the end of January, now all 10 provinces have cases of COVID-19.
We now have our first 3 presumptive cases of COVID-19 here in Nova Scotia.
Canada's chief public health officer warns the number of cases is rapidly rising in the country, particularly in BC, Alberta, and Ontario, which saw the highest increase of COVID-19 in one day, more than 40 cases, bringing the province's total to at least 145.
Our window to flatten the curve of the epidemic is narrow.
Dr. Teresa Tam says older adults are most vulnerable, but all ages are at risk.
Let me be very clear. Today, I am asking everyone to take strong action to help us delay the spread of COVID-19 and protect as many people as possible.
Alberta is taking more aggressive action, one day after saying schools would not be closed as they are in most other provinces. Now Alberta's top doctor wants all students to stay at home indefinitely.
It's my recommendation that students no longer attend classes in schools or post-secondary institutions until further notice.
Quebec's premier declared a public health emergency yesterday, allowing the province to close public spaces. Today, François Legault says bars, gyms, and movie theaters will be shuttered, even sugar shacks, to try to contain the virus.
Regarding restaurants, we asked them to reduce the capacity at 50% of the number of clients that usually they can welcome. We do that because we think that right now we have to slow the increase in the number of people infected.
Gatherings of 250 people or more have been canceled across the country, affecting museums, galleries, concerts. Casinos in Ontario and Quebec are closed. Most visitors are banned from senior care homes, and Quebec is asking anyone over 70 to stay home. Lest anyone doubt the need for social distancing, Alberta's chief medical officer of health says of the new cases reported in the province this weekend, 7 were infected from a single gathering in Calgary. John.
All right, thank you, Janet. CTV's Janet Dirks. Meanwhile, WestJet is advising the public that 2 passengers on 2 flights have tested positive for COVID-19. One of the infected travelers was on WestJet Flight 4 that flew London Gatwick to Toronto on March 11th. The other positive test was on Flight 3326 from Vancouver to Kelowna on March 10th. WestJet flight attendants are also bracing for job cuts as the pandemic grounds flights worldwide. An internal memo surfaced today warning the company is looking at ways to weather the storm, including possible layoffs. In the U.S., word tonight from United Airlines expecting revenues to be down by $1.5 billion this month. They've been making cuts across the board, with more coming. Even the CEO's base salary will be cut to zero. And with so much economic uncertainty from COVID-19, U.S. officials tonight slashed interest rates for the second time this month. The Federal Reserve is cutting rates to 0% and pumping another $700 billion into financial markets. It also coordinated with the Bank of Canada and banks in Europe and Japan to take action in the hopes of stalling a global recession. What those banks can't do is slow the spread of COVID-19, and the number of confirmed cases in the U.S. is rising rapidly. Today, there are more than 3,000 people infected across America. 62 have died. Washington State, California, and New York are hardest hit. Tonight, the CDC announced new guidelines on gatherings that could spread COVID-19. The advice that any group of more than 50 people be canceled for the next 8 weeks. That means mid-May. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin reports on a state of emergency south of the border.
Alarming scenes at America's airports from Chicago, New York to Dallas as waves of travelers return home following an expanded travel ban. Told to avoid crowds, but packed in, a crush of people forced to wait to be screened for the virus.
It's the worst system I could think of, considering what this contagion is.
Not what you want to see in the middle of a pandemic. Illinois' governor blasted the Trump administration to, quote, get it together now. Chicago's mayor pleading for more screeners.
You risk causing serious illness and death. That's a mistake, and it's avoidable.
New York already struggling with a hot zone of infections, closing public schools, affecting 1 million students.
We have never fought a virus like this. We are looking at a new war that no one has seen before.
The president leading the battle told Americans not to hoard groceries.
You don't have to buy so much. Take it easy. Just relax.
Upbeat, even as infections spread to almost every state, Trump insisted.
It's a very contagious virus. It's incredible, but it's something that we have tremendous control of.
His own people doling out dangerous advice.
If you're healthy, you and your family, it's a great time to just go out, go to a local restaurant, go to your local pub.
Totally contradicting Trump's top health official, who says this will get worse and Americans should hunker down.
I would like to see a dramatic diminution of the personal interaction that we see in restaurants and in bars. Whatever it takes to do that.
In a drastic step, several states like Ohio and Illinois doing just that, ordering bars and restaurants to close, California shuttering wineries, and curfews now in cities like Hoboken, New Jersey, and all of Puerto Rico. The Trump administration says it will soon have testing in all 50 states as hospitals fear a surge in cases. Aggressive measures like a national shutdown are not being ruled out, John.
Okay, thank you, Joy. The U.S. and Canada are hoping to prevent the tragedy unfolding in Italy, where hundreds of people are now dying every day and hospitals are running out of critical supplies. Spain is also under a total lockdown. France is shutting down almost everything, and concern is growing about what's really happening in Iran. CTV's Annie Bergeron Oliver has more on how the coronavirus is changing the world.
This is St. Peter's Square. It's usually packed with tens of thousands for Sunday Mass, but today there was only silence, the sound of a country under lockdown.
Completely surreal, exactly like the movie. It is a ghost town. There's not a single soul out.
Today, Italy recorded its largest one-day death toll, more than 360. Chilling video circulating on social media shows caskets lined up inside an empty church in Bergamo, a hard-hit city northeast of Milan. All across Europe, drastic measures are being taken. In France, all museums, cafes, restaurants, and non-essential shops are closed. Poland shut its borders, keeping foreigners out, and ordered mandatory 14-day quarantine for returning citizens. Slovakia has declared a state of emergency. And so has Spain. At midnight, it became the second European country to impose a nationwide lockdown on millions of people.
All cities are going to be getting worse, maybe on lockdown sooner than we think.
In the UK, there's no lockdown yet, But government officials are telling seniors over 70 to self-isolate.
To advise the elderly and the vulnerable who are most at risk from this virus to protect themselves, to shield themselves by self-isolating.
Officials with the World Health Organization's warning the crisis in Egypt and Iran is worse than it appears.
The current figures might be an underestimation of the actual figures. It's not because the country is not reporting, but because of the nature of the virus.
Ireland has ordered the closure of all of its pubs just 2 days before the country's biggest celebration, St. Patrick's Day. It's another sign of the serious measures countries are taking, John, to try and slow the spread.
Okay, thank you, Annie. Coming up, churches get creative.
For the next 2 weeks, we will be closed and we will be streaming online.
The coronavirus pushes places of worship into cyberspace. Plus, hands down, the fact